Welcome back. Earlier you heard about the problems at SAA Technical. That led to the grounding of certain planes today. Flights were delayed after the Civil Aviation Authority said it had found problems at the airline service provider. This led SAA and Comair to delay some flights. Luvuyo Silandela is from Civil Aviation's Legal and Aviation Compliance Department, Senior Director there. Luvuyo, good evening to you. Thanks so much for coming in tonight.
Evening.
Okay, firstly, what problems did you find at SAA Technical?
All right. So just to indicate, the South African Civil Aviation Authority conducted a surveillance audit which commenced on the 9th of October, wherein there were findings made that relate to safety. Particularly, there are two findings. The first one being that there was work that was determined to have been signed out by engineers who do not hold the specific ratings to release that work. And then the second one was in relation to certain maintenance checks that are required to be done.
Okay, now this can get quite complicated. I'm not an aircraft engineer. I know you understand the situation better than I do. As I understand it, a certain part could be used by various planes during its life. That part will be serviced, right? I presume from what you're saying is that a certain engineer of a certain grade, of a certain competence has to sign and say, this part has been checked and it's fine. Is that where the problem lay? So
certainly. So it is the engineer that after the work has been conducted, who has the responsibility to ensure that the work that has been conducted is of good quality and they can sign it off for release. So that's certainly the area that one of the findings relates to.
Okay, so the audit that you conducted, was it just on paper? In other words, you went to look for the signatures. I understand, I mean, that's probably on an iPad or something now. Or did you actually go and look at the parts and find problems with the parts?
All right. So essentially, the audit process entails review of documentation, evidence where it is required by the respective inspectors. So I just want to mention the issue in relation to the service checks was gleaned from paperwork wherein maintenance activity, not necessarily parts. I want to just clarify that part. Maintenance activities conducted and then it's signed out. That is where the issue is in relation to one of the findings. And then the other finding, of course, relates to critical components. That would be your FDR, flight data recorder, which is known as the black box, wherein information of the performance of that aircraft is stored for continuous use in the operations as well as in the event that there may be an accident. That's one of the areas where there's a finding. And then the other one would be cockpit voice recorders, wherein there are microphones in specific areas within the cockpit that also require regular testing and analysis.
Okay, where I'm going with all of this is that it's quite important to know if there was a paperwork problem and a problem with some of those instruments that you've referred to, or if there was actually a problem with the part. So in other words, the planes are probably safe to fly, but it's your job to make sure the proper procedures are followed to make 110% sure that they're safe to fly, and that was the problem here.
All right. We certainly wish to dispel the issue of alleged bogus parts.
Yeah.
They were not at all detected or part of the findings that I just mentioned. Okay. So the findings relate to the particularly two areas. There would be, of course, some other areas covered by the scope, but these are the two areas that has resulted in the steps that have been taken to make sure that we issue relevant notices, bringing the airline's attention to these areas, requiring immediate steps to make sure that those identified issues are determined, resolved, and all operations are conducted in a manner where all can vouch that there is safety.
Okay. Just to understand, this was routine. This wasn't a special, you didn't swoop in, have a pre-dawn raid like some authorities do. This was something you do all the time?
Not at all. As much as we may be empowered to conduct such ad hoc inspections where necessary, but this one was a surveillance audit where essentially there was a scheduled audit that had taken place. Then there is another audit to determine a defined scope of the operations.
Okay, so the planes that were affected now, it's obviously going to take SAA Technical a little while to sort all of this out. How long would you be prepared to give them to sort this out? I mean, would you expect things to be back to normal by the end of the week? That seems to be the story at the moment.
All right. So essentially, the kind of findings that were made require action not only from SAA Technical but the respective airlines, and they are not affected in the same manner. You would imagine not all aircraft have been covered by the aspects that have been identified. So The airlines have done their due diligence, determine which aircraft may have been affected by the issues, which one not. Then they hence the precautionary step to self-ground the determined ones to be affected so that they can be brought back into service.
Okay, so the airlines took the decision, not you.
Indeed. So there has been engagement that brought these issues requiring steps to be taken by the airlines. It is the airlines that sent corrective action plans where they say we are committing to A, B, and C. We review those and then determine if those are necessary to protect the interests of safety. So we've determined from the steps that have been taken by the parties involved, there's a spirit to get to the bottom of the issues, resolve, and not put any lives at stake.
Okay, are you able to say if you'd had to ground these planes, would you have?
We have a responsibility to act fairly and firmly when necessary, and we certainly carry out our mandate without any fear or bias.
Okay, there's been some discussion about SAA Technical, and for a while, I mean, and we realize there have been issues at SAA itself, and these are related companies, but obviously run quite differently in some ways as well, as I understand it. Has there been other problems at SAA Technical that you're aware of, that you're expecting to come to fruition, or is this, as far as you're aware, just a once-off from this inspection?
All right. So, indeed, SAA Technical and SAA are separate entities that hold separate certificates from the regulator. So that defines the scope of their operations. The operations of SAA Technical encroach that of purely SAA in that they do conduct maintenance for quite a variety of operators. So this audit has reflected these areas that require resolution, and we are reviewing evidence that is presented by the respective parties to make sure that the findings are closed.
Okay, SAA Technical, it's not a monopoly, but it's a majority. It basically performs work for the majority of airlines in South Africa, doesn't it?
Certainly, it does play that role. There are several aircraft and airlines that are maintained by SAA Technical.
If there's a problem at SAA Technical, is there enough capacity in the other service providers to fill the gap?
You do find SAA Technical, as you've stated, is not the sole maintenance organization within South Africa. So there are other organizations that do have the capacity to operate. They have such approvals, and arrangements can be made with our counterparts who do meet the standards that are set by international associations, which we are part of.
All right, Luvuyo, when are you expecting everything to get back to normal? I mean, best guess, I won't hold you to it.
What I can say is there's continuous engagement between the parties. So the CAA is receiving submissions by the hour from the respective airlines. Those are reviewed and processed in as efficient manner as possible to make sure that we do not unduly delay the finalization of this process.
There are going to be some humming WhatsApp groups tonight. Luvuyo Silandela, thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. The Civil Aviation, from SAA Civil Aviation's Legal and Aviation Compliance Department. Let's look at other news.